Thank you very much, Rachel. Um, and thank you, Pobi, I think, right? He almost brought out the African in me when he was moving around. I almost joined him on stage, but I just like, I'm not dressed for it. So thank you very much. And also, Anya, your presentation really spoke well to what I'm about to speak about. Um, you know, this topic is very important because in everywhere we are, and this is something for you to note that also as you are thinking of the education that you are providing your students, the work that you are doing in terms of what impact it will have on other people, on institutions, and also in the worlds that they live in, meaning the countries and the localities and economies that they exist in. So my name is Engineer Bello Tango. So I'm an engineer turned educator. And I talked about this 2 days ago, how the journey was for me, inspired by different people. And my experience, of course, has cut across business, education, construction, mentorship, teacher training, etc. Now, this is a very common quote, popular quote that people know about by Nelson Mandela, where he says, education is the most powerful tool that you can use to change the world. But for the world to change, it's important that worlds change. And so for me, changing the world is not just about the main global world, but it's also changing continents. For continents to also change, you need to change all the countries that exist within that continent. For that change to be effective within the countries, the states within those countries need to change. And for those states to change, the cities and towns within those states need to change. And so that's why I've put this as you're thinking, as I said, where you're coming from and where you exist within in terms of the work that you do as educators. This is a popular video on Facebook and YouTube, so I'll just play it so that we can have a good idea of what a true socio-economically developed world is. So I've picked the example of Singapore. I think there are many, I've met a few Singaporeans here. So you are a typical example of a truly socio-economically developed world, but also Dubai is one. So in hindsight, since we're here, I probably should have picked the video on Dubai, but I guess you will all relate also. So let me play this before we move forward.
Racism, poverty, traffic, pollution. In the world, there are so many countries with problems. It seems like every country and every person is filled with problems. So, who has the solutions? To answer that question, I decided to put my pride aside and go learn from a country that has the same problems as all of us, but has managed to find solutions. Because this is the incredible story of the almost perfect country of Singapore! In Singapore, many races live. The Indians, the Malay, Chinese, and Eurasians. And because people of different races might disagree and hate each other, Singapore forced all of them to live together in buildings on top of each other, next to each other. So instead of enemies, they are neighbors. And because of this, Singapore built a racial harmony that many countries don't have. Traffic. Many countries also suffer from traffic. It's the worst. In Singapore, they had traffic until they fixed it. In Singapore, they limited the number of cars on the road. The number of cars total in the entire country cannot increase. Many people, instead of cars, take public transportation, and very few people are stuck in traffic. Pollution is another environmental problem. Landfills look and smell disgusting in many countries, but in Singapore, they do not. Because they take their trash, they burn it, filter out the smoke, collect the ashes, and dump them underwater in a man-made island. Instead of this, the island looks like this. Their trash island is so clean, it looks like a resort. Another problem is fresh water. So much of it is wasted. But not in Singapore. These guys built an entire system that takes their poo and pee water, you know, this, and turns into clean water that humans can drink. And when you drink water that used to be poo, you realize water should never ever be wasted again. When I saw the way they build and do things, from water systems to airports to buildings to gardens, I was amazed. Because all of the problems above, they solved in 53 years since they gained independence. And you didn't hear that from me. You heard it from the Prime Minister himself.
Hi, I'm the Prime Minister. This is what we have been building in Singapore for 53 years, and we'll be building it for many more years to come.
Don't get me wrong. Singapore still has a lot of problems with no solutions that I know of. They too suffer from inequality, high prices, and tight security. Many elderly people still can't afford to retire. Many imported foreign workers are very low paid, and the government can be too restrictive. Even gum is illegal. Singapore has many problems, but unlike many, they are trying to fix them. That's why their passport is the strongest, their seaport is the second busiest, water is the cleanest, airport is the greatest, landfills are the prettiest, and people are the friendliest. I arrived in Singapore saying, I hate Singapore! Because I was jealous. But now I'm leaving Singapore saying I love Singapore because there's a lot we can learn from them. If they can solve so many problems in only 53 years, then why can't we?
Okay, who are the Singaporeans here? Okay, one. Okay, there were a few more of you a few days, 2 days ago. But for me, this was the quest in my life from my first career as a civil engineer, even up to now as an educator. And I come from my town, is Gombe State, which is why you see it in bracket. Come from the state, it's called Gombe. It's in Nigeria, and then in Africa, and then of course the continent is the world. So as I said, for me, the important thing was, how do I, in my career, change and improve my state, my town, and also my country and continent? And as I said, as I move along, also as you live here today, this should be the expectation in your students as far as performance is concerned. So, as I said, for me, it was from childhood, from age 1. It was all about developing myself, of course, intellectually, to become a civil engineer in 23 years. Of which I went through sciences, bachelor's in the UK, construction management. I did real estate in the private and public sector also. And then, privately also, I basically set up my own construction company. Afterwards, I talked about my story of how I realized construction and civil engineering wasn't really the important thing as far as the need of Nigeria and my community, and that I needed to do something bigger, which was education. And this was when I eventually transitioned from being a civil engineer to now an educator, where I now shape minds of human beings and people. So this presentation, I'm going basically into 3 main things. I'm going to talk about education in the socio-economic world, the issue of entrepreneurialism, because I think sometimes there's a differentiation and misunderstanding between entrepreneurial thinking and entrepreneurship. And then I'll talk about how all of this can be put together in all of your education and what you do in your schools and also as policymakers in your education sectors. First, by show of hands, what do you think influences the other? Does supply influence demand, or does demand influence supply? If you think supply influences demand, let me see your hands. Okay, 2, 3, Okay, how many think is the other way around? Demand should influence supply. Okay, more people then. So for that, yes, you are right. In most cases, generally, it's demand that influences supply. And I think the Singaporean, the gentleman there, also brought this issue up that as educators, we're providing or we're supplying products, which are the students, to a community or to a society where the demand is basically mismatched by what's required. So in that sense, what we need to understand is that it's a socio-economic world that we live in. So what that means is that constantly these students that are being graduated or that are being churned out of our institutions are going to be challenged both socially and economically. And I'll explain what each of these two mean. So since we know that that is the demand side of things, it's important that whatever education and learning that we provide, whether it's in terms of knowledge, skills, and attitude, within the school system, in terms of relationship between the student and the teacher, which is the learning itself, it should provide and supply to meet that demand. And as I said, that demand can be in industries, it can be in the community and government, and also it can be in terms of their personal lives. Now, so identifying the different demands in terms of these three aspects, as I said, their personal life, their professional life, and also their public life. Personal means in terms of them living at home individually, but also with families. To a certain extent, also them going into university and existing as students. On the professional level, in terms of their demand, the demand from their employers, or if they are self-employed, the demand from their startups or their businesses. And then on the public level, also it means the demand of their government and also the demand of the community where they reside in. So in most cases, what they are expected to achieve or the demand that is expected of them is in terms of how they will be productive or how they will survive and thrive as productive members of their homes and their families, productive members of their institutions, whether they are employed by an institution or they have started a business themselves, or the demand of their communities or the governments. So we need to address each of these three categories. As I said, personal, professional, and public. So let's start with the personal. This, from the work that I do for the past few years with Tungsten, we've identified this. This is more of a different version of what we know as the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is that personally, for themselves and their families, this is the number one, or even actually every other individual here, one of the main, the main demand or the main requirement as far as them performing in life is that they should be able to serve the personal interest and development of individuals. As I said, it's also their own individual self. So on a physical level, it's all about the demand for them to actually grow and thrive on a physical level. So looks, health, which is why we have subjects like physical health education in the school and the curriculum, the energy, and also the time that their body is supposed to exist on this earth. Number two, there's a demand in terms of their material health or their material life. So this is something like money, making money. This is one of the things I always ask my teachers when I meet them now, that if we were required to learn about making money for ourselves and for other people, why was the school system not educating us on it, So the material life is something that is very much part of the day-to-day life when they graduate from their school. The emotional side of things, so that's EQ, emotional intelligence, relationships with people, and also esteem, whether it's self-esteem or social esteem. This was very much talked about in day one of this session when we talked about social and emotional learning. We are social beings, and so, we are emotional beings and social also, of course. So the demand of existing in relationships and also networking and all of that is something that will be demanded of by the student, by the child or the graduate. On the intellectual level, this is what, unfortunately, the schools only focus on the intellectual side of things, which is you must have high IQ, no mathematics, science, and all of that. It is important, but also, as I said, it's not the only necessary thing. On the spiritual side of things, this is about doing good, avoiding evil, conscience, and also having morals and values. This is what religions and religious subjects try to serve in terms of the development of the child. So on a personal level, these are the 5 things that are being demanded of the child. And it's also the same thing that individuals are looking for. Next, let's go to the second category, or the third category before we go to the second, which is in terms of public interest or public demand. As I said, this is what their governments and the communities that they live in, or the worlds that they live in, demand of. So on the personal development side of things, this is very much the 5 things I just talked about. So it means as a government, I demand that the graduates of my schools are going to be able to serve the personal development of citizens of that locality. Now, on a sociocultural level, I also demand as government or as the public, I demand that there is going to be a lot of harmony and also basically appreciation of citizenship and diversity of people. The economic development side of things, I demand also that as a government or as a public, I demand that there needs to be or economic development of the locality. So to better understand this, it's important that you can also think of your own location. So let's use maybe Dubai, for instance. The expectation is that the personal development of citizens of Dubai will be achieved by whatever aptitude that you provide as a graduate. Sociocultural level also, there needs to be that in terms of harmony, of diversity, economic development of Dubai. Also, I'm just using Dubai as an example, but as I said, you can use your own locality or where you come from as an example. Then, sustainable development, which is what the UN tries to, I guess, put out to everybody around the world, that will also guide what's the expectation of economic or socio-economic development of every country is. So this is on a public level, public service, public interest, and public development. So we've done 2 now. The third level, which is the professional development, is where the entrepreneurial thinking that I'm talking about will basically serve the most. So, okay, you know about the SDGs, of course. So this is just talking more about it, which is what I talked about now in the previous slide. But let's go on to the professional development side of things. It's expected that as a graduate of a school or as an educated person, that you are supposed to be able to serve the value of products and services of any institution, the profitability of a business or enterprise, and also the influence of that business or enterprise. I'm going to use Intercontinental Hotel as an example. One of the most important things that they expect as a graduate or somebody that is looking for a job there is that you should improve the value of whatever Intercontinental provides as a product or service, the influence that it has in its own market compared to other hotels and other venues, and also the profitability of the enterprise itself of Intercontinental Hotel. So this is something that you can also apply, as I said, depending on where your own institution is. Benefits of enterprise and entrepreneurship, creative thinking, innovation, critical thinking, and all of the different things that we still expect as a product of education. So you can start seeing the harmony now between the two, which is that what education is trying to achieve is also something that what the industry or enterprise will be seeking to achieve. And in terms of the development of the child or the graduate, he is going to acquire each of these in terms of being a success out of the school system. Now, my second topic, in order to really understand the full entrepreneurial education for global sustainable development, is to talk about entrepreneurialism. Now, one of the things in the work that I do in Nigeria, why people move away or shy away from really addressing this in the school system is they misunderstand the concept of money and value. And this is why, as I said, why were we not taught how to make money either for ourselves or for other people when we are going to be demanded for in terms of employment and also seeking for jobs and existing in society. So my understanding, or I guess the work that we try to do or we inform people in terms of making money or value versus money, is that it's almost, I guess we view it more like a tool in terms of exchange of whatever you are looking for versus what you have. So if all of us here, actually, if the doors were closed, for an example is that if the doors here were closed and we are all basically starving for 7 days, for instance, and I am holding a loaf of bread here, yeah, for an example, and you're all starving, but each of you have 10 million, 10 million, $10 million. What you value the most is to serve the hunger that you are needing. I am okay. I'm not hungry, but I have a loaf of bread. You'll be willing to exchange that $1 million or $10 million for that loaf of bread. Yeah? So for you, that is what you value the most. And so what I try to also tell educators and people that we work with is that it's all about still the same demand and supply side of things. And so we should not shy away from it. As I said, institutions will demand for the graduates to be able to serve these 3 things that I said: improve their value, improve their influence, improve their profitability. And so that is what you are getting in exchange as a graduate or as an employee in terms of what you provide for the salary that you are getting from the other side of things, you know. So this is something that is important to address when you are going about doing the whole entrepreneurial thinking, because this is something that you have objections, whether from parents or even the school system, from the teachers and the government itself. And we have experienced this also at Tungsten in the work that we're doing. But after addressing this, they kind of are also on the way to accepting, but it's still a long way to go, I think, in certain cases. So in terms of businesses and enterprise, of course, I gave the example of Intercontinental Hotel, but some of us here also own our own businesses. And what we do in terms of addressing the whole entrepreneurial thinking side of things is we do recognize that different professions or students, when they graduate, they fall within mainly these two sides of the employability route. So it's either they are at the they are the white collar vocations, which is your typical engineering, law, medicine, and all of that, or they fall within the blue collar version of the professional life, which is where you have the technical, vocational of agriculture, construction, plumbing, and things like that. However, the beautiful thing about this, what we try to do, is also to get people to see the connection between the two. Because it really stops, it really discourages students that are going to certain institutions like polytechnics versus going to a typical university. They think that going down this route is not of value or is almost diminishing compared to the ones that are doctors and engineers. But we try to get them to see the connection between the two. As an engineer, I still needed law, for instance. I needed to know about building codes, and in fact, there's something called construction law and things like that. And even now, as an educator, I still see the relationship between the two. So this is something that we try to do a comparison for them, and it's something that you can also do before this full acceptance of entrepreneurial thinking to be, or entrepreneurial education, to be something that is embraced, not just by government, but by everyone in the system. Now, let's go right into it. For us at Tungsten, we try to define entrepreneurial thinking to be serving personal, professional, and the public interests of people, of institutions, and also of the world. But mind you, as I said, the world can be just a state, a city, your country, or even the continent or the global world. And as I said, it's tied to 3 things for us: the value of your products and services, the influence of the brand that you have, and also the profitability of the business on an enterprise. There is something that we now address called intrapreneurship, meaning if you really master this entrepreneurial thinking, you can be going down the route of intrapreneurship or entrepreneurship. The most thing, the one that people really know the most about is entrepreneurship, meaning you go and start up a business. So you learn how to build an influential brand, a profitable business, and also a valuable product for your own business. But what we have now learned is that you can also use the same principles to get job. So that is what intrapreneurship means. It means you go seeking for a job, but you are thinking like the owner of the business. So let me use the same example as Intercontinental Hotel. If I was going to look for a job in the Intercontinental Hotel, beyond the certificate of of my vocation as a hospitality or management graduate, or any competence that I have in sciences, arts, and all of that, what is most important is that the hiring manager of Intercontinental Hotel will be thinking, how are you going to help the value of my products and services? How are you going to improve the influence of my brand as Intercontinental Hotel? And how are you going to improve the profitability of Intercontinental Hotel? So this is very, very important, because most of us, most of the students, when they graduate from schools, they are going down the route of basically seeking for jobs. Not everybody goes down this route of entrepreneurship, but it's important that to improve the employability, or to improve the employability of the student to get a job, it's important that he thinks also intrapreneurially. So he's thinking like the owner of the business, basically. That is that is the best way that we feel and that we have seen the person will really have high chances of getting the job. So this is the connection between the two, but also the difference between the two. One is for yourself, the other one is for your employer. And so this is what we try to put within the curriculum of students across primary, secondary, tertiary, and post-tertiary level, but also the ones that want to really just venture out and set up their own thing. But we'll see more about what each of these three things mean. On the value side of things is basically in terms of what tangible assets that you're going to create for that venture. As I said, the venture could be your employer, which is basically like Intercontinental Hotel. You're looking for a job there. But it can be your own hotel. But it's still the same thing that we're checking in terms of the value of product or service that you offer. It's mainly defined or judged by three things: design, comfort, innovation, money, time, energy. This is something that, of course, it will take a while, because I'm also trying to be mindful of time to address. But these three things, as I said, if you don't take anything out of today, the value of your products and services, the influence of your brand, and also the profitability of the business. This is something that each and every of the students will need as they are going through whether it's mathematics or English or sciences, engineering, medicine, and all of what they go through. And this is what we try to introduce and integrate into the national curriculum, and also in all the academics that they go through. I still have time? Okay, yeah. Because I want to also allow space for question and answers. Next, let me go through the final stage, which is in terms of how we put the two together, the entrepreneurial thinking together with the education. Now, I did mention that it has to go across not just the curriculum side of things, but it also has to go through the teaching. So we try to also build up the capacity of the educator to be an entrepreneurial educator, because you cannot give what you don't have. It's important that as you are teaching mathematics, you are an entrepreneurial maths teacher. As you're teaching sciences, you're an entrepreneurial science teacher. As you're teaching arts, an entrepreneurial arts teacher. So that when these students graduate, they become entrepreneurial doctors, entrepreneurial engineers, entrepreneurial lawyers, and etc. Why? So that if they are going the intrapreneurial route, they are thinking of the three things I mentioned: brand influence, product value, and business profitability, whether it's for themselves or the businesses that they want to set up. So it has to basically cut across not just the curriculum, but also the teaching. Something that is very much forgotten about is the assessment side of things. It means the assessment also has to change beyond standardized exams. What we try to do at Tungsten, and what we have seen that really works in terms of the integration of entrepreneurial thinking with education, is that everything has to be project-based. However, the projects have to be almost tied to what we typically see in industry or in enterprise. So a typical example is that when we give them certain projects in terms of building their own brand, for instance, the maths teacher, he's going to come and check the mathematical side or the mathematical competence of the child when they are building the brand. The science teacher will probably think of the the value side of the product or service that they create, and typically maybe the business studies teacher will think of the profitability side of the business or enterprise that they have created. So this is how we try to basically find an angle to each subject that the students go through to make sure that we draw out or we assess the competencies that are typically expected academically within the different subjects that are taught within the school. But as I said, it's important that the teaching side also, or the teacher also, is entrepreneurial, because he is not going to understand how he will really sort out those competencies that he expects academically within his or her own subject. So typically, we have different obvious competencies that we check in terms of the knowledge side. The reason why we give 15% for the knowledge side of things is because we feel now there's so much knowledge and information in Google, YouTube, and things like that. So we assess the knowledge side, just give it minor, basically, and then moderate level, we check the skill side of things. But bigger, beyond the two, we check the attitude side of things, character of the student. We feel if the student really has the right character and the right attitude, it will be easier to acquire these other two. So that is why we give a higher scale in terms of the assessment of the attitude or the entrepreneurial attitude side of the student. So these are the typical things that we checked. We use rubrics to assess such. So it's not the typical, as I said, standardized exams way of evaluation. Holistically, the school also, the system of the school has to change. As I said, not just in terms of how they provide their curriculum, but the environment needs to change. It needs to connect with industry also. So typically what the industry is looking for, what Intercontinental Hotel is looking for a graduate of hospitality or from any other management or business studies graduate, what Mercedes are looking for in terms of the competencies of the child has to be connected to what the school is providing. So there must be a synergy between the two. But it's not just with the industry level, but the public sector also, because they are also eventually going to, these students, they are also eventually going to serve in government. So it's important that whatever economic needs of Dubai, for instance, is needing, then every Emirati student or graduate of a school has all of that and is very much aware, whether it's the constitution side of things, how governance is run, and what the demand or the vision of Dubai in the next 10 years, for example, is looking for. All of it needs to be part of the school system. As I said, the curriculum has to mix the technical vocational side of things. It needs to do a lot of the projects within its own curriculum. And also, we find that using co-curricular and extracurricular activities to really further support whatever we're doing in the main curriculum helps as well, whether in or out of school. Assessment, I've talked about assessment. By the way, it doesn't mean that we should do away with the typical standardized exams side of things. It's just that it needs to be blended with also the project side of things, where you use metrics and rubrics to assess. Internships are also very important to check really the competence of the child in terms of entrepreneurial thinking. So what we do is that we provide avenues for them to do internships, but we go beyond that. We provide even the rubric or the assessment that the manager or the supervisor of that institution is going to be checking and using, and they give us the reports to make sure that really the children or the graduates have acquired these aptitudes that we have given them. The beautiful thing about this is that that is the best way to actually check the character side of things, because the child may come and say that, yes, I know about leadership, yes, I am honest and this and that, but it's only when you put them within the working environment, that's when they forget that, oh, I'm supposed to remember to be honest and honest and diligent, hardworking. And it provides the best way to check attitude side and character side of the child in terms of his competence. On the teaching, the good thing about the whole project-based entrepreneurial thinking side of things is that it enables us to really integrate what we typically learn in terms of Bloom's taxonomy, high-order thinking, multiple intelligence, and the typical things, basically, that we know about in the field of education. It provides a very good way to integrate all of it. This is just basically the national policy on education in Nigeria, and why I put that is that in each of your different locations, you all have a national policy on education. And what we'll see is that it very much, the whole entrepreneurial thinking side or entrepreneurial education also serves what the governments or the localities that you exist in are looking for also. So it does help the public side of things. In the state that I work in, mainly in Gombe State where I'm from, what we have seen is that everything that we're doing in entrepreneurial education also serves what the government is looking for. So the government has 5 pillars that they are always thriving for the next 10 years. And what we have seen is that everything that we do as Tungsten through entrepreneurial education is serving those needs. The needs are also very tied to the SDGs, so it does help in terms of solving for the greater good and making the world of Gombe State or my state and Nigeria and the continent as a whole better. So just let me conclude by more information on Tungsten, because many times when I talk about this, people have questions and also trying to figure out like how does it really work in practical terms. Because we do work with so many schools across different parts of the continent, but now we're also going out of the continent which is why I'm here to also see how really our model can work within different jurisdictions, whether it's India or Singapore or the US, UK, and all, Ghana, for instance, also, to see whether this model can really work in every school. As I said, for us, it's about cutting across from the primary level to the secondary school level, to the tertiary, and also to the post-tertiary, which is professionals like you. We think and we believe and we have seen that it can really work. We have so many beneficiaries that have acquired this and that are putting this into practice. And of course, in education, sometimes you need 5 years or so to really see the true fruit of it. But there has been so much transformation in the educators, in the schools, and also in the students that exist within this system. So it's something that also we'd like to explore and see really whether our model or our formula can work in different other jurisdictions as you guys, from wherever you come from. So I will stop here, I think. Okay, this is just our campus that we're looking to develop this year. And the reason why this campus is important also is because we are now proving to the state government of Gombe that really infrastructural development can be green, it can be eco-friendly, and it can also be as functional as possible. So everything that we do, we try to integrate, whether it's, as I said, from the public interest level, from the professional interest level, and also from the personal interest level. So I am going to, I think that's the final slide. Oh yeah, so thank you. Any questions? I don't know, maybe I've exhausted my time. Thank you.
Give him a round of applause, everybody. A great, 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 inspiring presentation. Thank you, Tungsten Online as well. I'm coming into the audience, wake you guys up a little bit. That music got me moving. Who do we have in the audience to ask some questions? To Bello, what do you got? All right. Here we go. Samir from Jordan, welcome. Tell me who you are and what you're here for, and then you can go on with your question.
Hello, everyone. I'm Samir from Jordan, and it's great to be here with great educators from all over the world. My question to you is, was this really taken into implementation? And was this really taken into implementation? The model looks great, really, very interesting. That's the first question. How do we take it into implementation, since you have to go back to look at the competencies needed at the workplace and so on, and the governmental side of it and so on? That's the first question. And the second question, do you think mentoring students can be part of this model at large? And how does that really happen for mentoring for a school student as part of the model?
Yes. I think your first question in terms of whether this works across all curriculum, yes, so it does, as I said. What we try to do is that we try to focus on the transferable business or enterprise skills. So that is why when we look at the 3 arms that I said, brand influence, product value, and business profitability, each of these 3, actually, if you go in more detail, it has sub-levels or sub-elements that accumulate or form what each of these 3 are. But as I said, what's important is that whatever that we focus on is transferable so that, and it's actually a beautiful way that we do it. Why we do that is so that it doesn't matter whether the child has really left, as I did. I left civil engineering, I went into education. What happens is that you find that they can really apply each of these different 3 arms and the sub-levels or elements within any sector that they are in. And as I said, whether they are going the intrapreneurial route, looking for a job and becoming productive employees and getting a raise and promotions, or they are going the entrepreneurial route, which is basically setting up their businesses or helping other existing businesses do their job. So it's something that is transferable. We were very deliberate to focus on the transferable business or enterprise skills so that you are not just boxed into one sector or one industry. And on your second question, mentoring, yes. As I said, the change that needs to happen that we do, even especially on the section of the school, is that the timetable, the academic calendar, and every other practice that they do, whether curricular or co-curricular, is also changed. So we do all of that redesign. It's not enough to just train their teachers or to provide textbooks that are entrepreneurial mathematics textbook, entrepreneurial English textbook. It's not enough to do that. We go further to make sure that the calendar and the timetable also change. Why does it need to change? It's so that what you mentioned can happen. So whether it's in internships or mentorship or even avenues where we expect the children or the students to go and teach others, we try to accommodate each of these within the timetable, as I said, within the academic calendar, and within curricular and co-curricular activities, which is basically what they do after school, after their typical academics are done. So that is the best way to achieve it. It's not just, as I said, not just the teachers being trained or the books on entrepreneurial thinking provided for them, even the scheme or the scheduling of the programming needs to change. So this is what we also do. Some schools don't want to go that far, but we do make it obvious to them that, look, for it to really work, you have to provide those avenues for internships, for mentorship, and things like that. And we try our best also to provide them with those mentors, depending on where their child, where the student is interested in, whether it's in the medical, engineering, law, and whatever, we find mentors accordingly. And those mentors also, as I said, they're not just mentors that are working as entrepreneurs or employees, but they are mentors that have also set up their own hospitals, their construction companies, their own law firms, and things like that. So it's very much driven to what the child's interest is, and we cater to that. Yeah.
Amazing information. Give him a round of applause, guys. Thank you so much, Bello Tango. It's a pleasure to watch you on stage. He knows what he's doing. He knows what he's talking about. He's making.
I'm still available for any questions.
All right. You on LinkedIn?
LinkedIn, yeah.
Yeah, don't worry. Everyone who wants to connect.
It was on the slide.
Great. I just want to make sure you didn't miss it.
Yes,
right? And you're joined. There he is, Bello
And my
Tango.
email is there, and Tungsten and everything that we do for you to have more information is there.
Fantastic. Connect, connect, connect. I see you're joined by a loved one here.